In 1881, a lawman rode into a small Arizona Territory town, and within 6 months, 17 men were dead. Not outlaws, not gunfighters, citizens. The badge on his chest said Marshal, but the way he hunted said something else entirely. He tracked men like prey. He set traps like a predator. And when the locals finally dug up what he'd been hiding in the desert, they realized the wolf had been wearing the star all along. This is the story of James Addison Reavis, the man who turned justice into a hunting ground. And by the time the town understood what he really was, the body count had already become unforgivable. His name was James Addison Reavis, though most knew him simply as Marshal Reed. He arrived in the mining settlement of Contention City in early March 1881, riding a black stallion and carrying nothing but a Winchester rifle, a Colt .45, and a letter of recommendation from a marshal in New Mexico Territory. A letter that, as it turned out, was completely fabricated. Contention City sat in the San Pedro Valley, deep in disputed Apache land. It was a place where silver pulled desperate men from across the country. Prospectors, gamblers, drifters, men running from the law or running toward fortune. The town had maybe 300 permanent residents, but on any given night, twice that many strangers filled the saloons and boarding houses. The previous marshal, a man named Tom Hendricks, had been shot in the back while making rounds one foggy October evening. The one before that, Marshal William Cross, simply vanished after announcing he'd be investigating cattle rustling in the hills. His horse returned 3 days later. He didn't. So when James Addison Reavis rode into town that March morning, the town council was desperate. The silver mine owners wanted order. The merchants wanted safety. And Reed looked like salvation. Tall, clean-shaven, with cold gray eyes that seemed to see through lies. He wore his Colt revolver low on his hip like a man who'd used it. He spoke in a low, measured voice that commanded respect without demanding it. The town council hired him within an hour of his arrival. The salary was $40 a month, plus a small house behind the jail. Reed accepted with a single nod, and immediately began walking the perimeter of town, studying every entrance, every alley, every shadow where trouble could hide. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that Reed had never been a lawman before. Not officially. He'd been a tracker during the Apache campaigns, a bounty hunter who'd brought in 7 men over 3 years, all dead. All claimed to have resisted arrest. Before that, witnesses said he'd ridden with Confederate irregulars during the war, the kind of units that didn't take prisoners and didn't follow rules. Reed understood how wolves thought because he'd become one, and Contention City had just given him a license to hunt. The town was a powder keg. Miners fought over claims, saloons ran illegal. Gambling and tensions with nearby Apache bands kept everyone on edge. The territorial governor was 300 miles away in Tucson. The nearest federal marshal was in Tombstone, 2 days' ride. In Contention City, the law was whatever the man with the badge said it was. Reed promised order, and he delivered it, but not the way anyone expected. It started with the drifters. 3 men arrived in town on a Tuesday afternoon in late March, rough types who immediately started causing problems at the Silver Dollar Saloon. They were loud, drunk, and making threats about taking over a nearby mining claim they said had been stolen from their cousin. Most marshals would have arrested them, thrown them in a cell overnight, and run them out of town at dawn. Reed didn't arrest them. He watched them. For 2 days he followed them at a distance, studying their patterns like an animal stalking prey. He learned where they camped in the hills east of town. He noted that they posted no guard at night. He observed that they always left before dawn to scout mining claims. On the 3rd night, their campfire went cold. Their bodies were found a week later by a prospector, arranged in a strange pattern near a dry creek bed, face down, hands bound behind their backs, each shot once in the back of the head, execution style. Apache, Reed told the town council when he filed his report. I warned them not to camp in Apache territory. They didn't listen. But something felt wrong to those, who'd seen the bodies. The kills were too clean. No scalping, no mutilation, no theft. The men still had their boots, their weapons, even their pocket watches. Just 3 bullets, 3 bodies, and a lawman who showed no emotion when he reported the deaths. The town council accepted his explanation. After all, he was the law, and Apache raids were a constant threat. Then came the claim dispute. Two mining partners, brothers named Daniel and Robert Colfax, got into a violent argument over how to split their earnings. It was the kind of dispute that happened weekly in mining towns. Usually men settled it with fists, or a mediator helped them work it out. Reed offered to mediate. He said he'd take both men to inspect the disputed claim and help them reach an agreement. The three of them rode out on a Thursday morning. Only Daniel Colfax came back. He was pale, shaking, and could barely form words when he reported that his brother had attacked him with a pickaxe, that Marshal Reed had been forced to shoot Robert in self-defense, and that his brother's body had fallen down a mine shaft during the struggle. Reed's official report matched Daniel's story exactly. Case closed. But Catherine Booth noticed something. She was the widow of a miner who died 6 months earlier in what Reed called a tragic accident, a mine collapse that only her husband had been in. She'd never believed it. And now, watching Daniel Colfax at the general store, she saw the terror in his eyes every time someone mentioned the marshal's name. 3 weeks later, Daniel Colfax disappeared. Reed's report: last seen drunk at the saloon, likely fell into a ravine or wandered into Apache territory while intoxicated. Catherine started keeping a list. She wrote down every suspicious death, every disappearance, every man who'd argued with Reed or questioned his methods. By the end of April, she had 7 names, all men, all dead or missing, all within 2 months of Reed's arrival. But no one would listen to a widow's suspicions. Reed was the marshal. Reed had brought order. Crime was down. The saloons were quieter. The streets felt safer. What they didn't realize was that the town felt safer because Reed was systematically eliminating anyone who might cause problems, or anyone who might discover what he really was. The pattern was invisible at first because Reed was patient. He never killed 2 men close together. He varied his methods: Apache attacks, mining accidents, drunken falls, self-defense shootings. He chose victims carefully: men without family, men who were disliked, men who wouldn't be missed immediately. But Catherine Booth was watching, and she wasn't the only one. The turning point came in early June when Reed arrested Frank Tolliver, a well-liked rancher and father of 3 who'd been accused of stealing cattle from a neighboring spread. Tolliver was a respected man. He'd served as a deputy before Reed arrived, and he had a reputation for honesty. Tolliver swore he was innocent. He demanded a trial. He said he had witnesses who could prove he'd been in town when the cattle went missing. Reed said he had evidence: a branding iron found on Tolliver's property that matched the stolen cattle. Tolliver's wife pleaded for patience. "Wait for the circuit judge," she begged. "He'll be here in 2 weeks. Let Frank have a fair trial." Reed agreed. He locked Tolliver in the jail cell and promised he'd be held safely until the judge arrived. But 3 nights later, at approximately 2 a.m., Reed claimed Tolliver tried to escape. According to Reed's report, Tolliver had somehow acquired a key, unlocked his cell, and made a run for it through the back door of the jail. Reed pursued him. Tolliver refused to stop when ordered. Reed fired a warning shot. Tolliver kept running. Reed fired again and hit Tolliver in the back, just below the left shoulder blade. Frank Tolliver died in the dirt street behind the jail, face down, still in his prison clothes. But Frank's 16-year-old son, Samuel, saw it happen from across the street. The boy had been sleeping in the livery stable, watching over his father, unable to sleep from worry. He saw Marshal Reed lead his father out of the jail at gunpoint. He saw his father's hands were tied behind his back. He saw Reed shoot a man who couldn't run, couldn't fight back, couldn't defend himself. Samuel screamed that his father had his hands tied, that he wasn't running, that Marshal Reed had executed him. Reed turned those cold gray eyes on the boy and said in front of the gathering crowd, "Grief makes people see things that aren't there, son. Your father tried to escape. I gave him every chance to surrender." The town believed Reed. They always believed Reed. He was the law. But Samuel Tolliver wasn't grieving yet. He was enraged, and he wasn't going to let his father's murder go unanswered. If you love dark, real stories from the Old West, where the line between justice and murder disappeared in the gao, dust and badges meant nothing, consider subscribing and leaving a like. It helps us bring you more of these untold nightmares from America's most violent era. And now, back to the case, because what Samuel discovered would expose a monster wearing a badge. The morning after his father's murder, Samuel rode into the desert. He knew Reed had been taking men into the hills for months. He knew his father wasn't the first, and he had a terrible suspicion about where the bodies were going. He followed the trails Reed had taken with other criminals. He tracked the hoof prints of that black stallion through dry creek beds and across rocky terrain where most men would have lost the trail. But Samuel had grown up in this desert. He knew how to read disturbed earth, broken branches, the faint compression of sand that indicated recent passage. 3 hours into the desert, he found it. A shallow ravine hidden behind a formation of red rocks, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look, and what Samuel Tolliver found in that ravine made his blood freeze. Personal belongings scattered across the sand, wallets with names still legible, pocket watches, some still ticking, wedding rings, a miner's pickaxe with D. Colfax carved into the handle, Daniel's brother Robert, the man who'd supposedly fallen down a mine shaft, a leather vest with Tom Hendrick's Marshal stitched inside, the previous lawman everyone thought had been killed by outlaws, and beneath a thin layer of sand and rock, barely covered skeletal remains, at least 15 bodies in various stages of decomposition, some fresh enough that clothing still clung to the bones, others reduced to sun-bleached skeletons scattered by scavengers. Reed hadn't been enforcing the law. He'd been hunting, selecting targets, men who were alone, men without powerful friends, men who wouldn't be missed immediately. He'd turn them into outlaws with false reports, manufactured evidence, convenient witnesses. Then he'd execute them in the desert and bury them in this ravine. The Apache raids everyone feared. Most of them were Reed's cover stories. Samuel Tolliver gathered what evidence he could carry and rode back to town like the desert itself was chasing him. Samuel went straight to Catherine Booth. He spread the evidence across her kitchen table. The wallets, the watches, the vest with Marshal Hendrick's name. Catherine added her list of suspicious deaths. Together, they had enough to hang any ordinary man 10 times over. But Reed wasn't ordinary, and convincing the town council to move against their own marshal would be nearly impossible. Catherine and Samuel went to the mayor first, a mining executive named Howard Pritchard, who'd been one of Reed's strongest supporters. Pritchard didn't want to believe it. He argued that the evidence could have been planted by Apache raiders, that the bodies could be anyone, that Marshal Reed had brought order to a lawless town. But Catherine had kept meticulous records. She showed Pritchard the dates. 7 men had died or disappeared in Reed's first month, 5 more in the second month, 3 in the third. The pattern was undeniable once you saw it clearly. "He's a serial killer with a badge," Catherine said, "and if we don't stop him now, he'll keep killing until there's no one left who questions him." Pritchard finally agreed to investigate. He gathered 3 trusted men, the bank owner, a successful rancher, and a former Union cavalry officer, and they rode to the ravine with Samuel guiding them. What they found confirmed every terrible suspicion. Bodies, evidence, a killing field that Reed had been using for months. They returned to town and called an emergency council meeting. The decision was unanimous. Marshal James Addison Reavis must be arrested and held for trial. But when they went to arrest him, Reed was gone. His horse was missing from the stable. His belongings had been cleared from the marshal's house. Even his badge, the symbol of authority he'd worn for 6 months, lay abandoned on the desk in the jail office. Somehow Reed had known. Maybe he'd seen Samuel riding back from the desert. Maybe he'd noticed the council meeting. Maybe he'd simply sensed that his hunting ground was about to become his trap. A posse formed immediately. 12 men, heavily armed, led by the former cavalry officer. They tracked Reed into the Sonoran Desert, following the prints of that black stallion, across increasingly harsh terrain. Reed was moving fast, but he wasn't running scared. His tracks showed calculation, deliberation. He was heading somewhere specific. For 3 days, they pursued him through brutal heat. Men dropped out from exhaustion. Horses went lame. But Samuel Tolliver and 6 others kept going, driven by grief and rage and the need to see justice done. On the 4th morning, they realized where Reed was going. Back to the ravine. Back to his killing ground. Maybe he'd left something there he couldn't abandon. Maybe. He thought he could ambush the posse in terrain he knew intimately. Or maybe after 6 months of wearing a lawman's badge, the wolf simply wanted to return to his den one last time. The posse surrounded the ravine at dawn. Reed was there, crouched among the rocks, his rifle already aimed at the approaching riders. He didn't try to negotiate, didn't try to explain. He simply opened fire. The first shot hit the cavalry officer in the shoulder. The second shattered another man's canteen. Then, the posse returned fire. A thunder of gunshots that echoed off the ravine walls like the desert itself was screaming. Reed hit 2 more men before a bullet from Samuel Tolliver's rifle struck him in the chest. He stumbled backward, fell against the red rocks, and died in the same ravine where he'd buried 17 of his victims. They searched his belongings afterward, found a journal where he'd recorded every kill with cold precision, dates, names, methods, even sketches of where he'd hidden the bodies. The final entry, written the night before he fled: "The hunt is over. The wolf must run." The count was worse than anyone had imagined. 17 confirmed murders, but the journal referenced previous territories and earlier work. How many others had died before Reed came to Contention City? How many other towns had a monster wearing a badge? They would never know. Reed took those secrets to his unmarked grave. The town buried James Addison Reavis in an unmarked grave outside the cemetery, in unconsecrated ground where murderers and suicides were laid to rest. They didn't want his name remembered, didn't want a marker that might become some twisted monument to a serial killer. But Catherine Booth made sure the victims' names were recorded. She compiled a memorial that listed every man Reed had killed, their ages, where they'd come from, who they'd left behind. 17 names, 17 lives stolen by a man who'd turned the badge into a hunting license. The town council dissolved Contention City 6 months later. The silver mine played out, production dropped, and no one wanted to stay in a place where the law had hunted like a wolf. By 1883, Contention City was a ghost town, abandoned buildings slowly being reclaimed by the desert, a monument to what happens when evil wears the face of authority. James Addison Reavis remains one of the most terrifying figures in Old West history, not because of how many he killed, but because of how he killed them. He understood something fundamental about frontier justice. In a place with no real law, the man with the star could become the most dangerous predator of all. No trial, no witnesses, just a bullet, a convenient story, and a desert that kept secrets. The badge didn't make him a monster. It just gave the monster permission to hunt. Samuel Tolliver lived to be 73 years old. He never became a lawman, never wore a badge. When asked why, he'd say, "I saw what a badge can do in the wrong hands. I saw the wolf wearing the star. And I'll never forget that sometimes the thing we trust to protect us is the thing we should fear most." If you want more true stories from the darkest corners of the Old West, where lawmen became killers, justice was just another word for murder, and badges meant nothing, make sure to subscribe and leave a like. These stories deserve to be remembered, and your support helps us uncover more forgotten nightmares from America's most violent frontier. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? City and country? And have you ever heard of a case where the person meant to protect became the predator? And don't go anywhere. There's another Old West nightmare waiting for you in the next video. One where the hunter became the hunted, the posse turned into a lynch mob, and the chase ended in blood and fire. Click now if you dare.